everybody. It's Heather, and I am here with Chris McKinnell for this week's episode of the Warren Files. And those of you who have been asking a lot of questions lately about Annabelle and the Amityville house, so we're going to start with topics on those. And feel free to ask any questions you have about either of those cases. I'm sure Chris can answer them the best he can. He's better at it than he has firsthand knowledge more than I do. Or any other questions about anything paranormal, we're always happy to answer the questions. So, Chris, I just want to thank you again for letting us do this. I enjoy doing these presentations, and I'm hoping you do too.
Oh, absolutely. Any opportunity we have to help educate people and keep them out of trouble, that's really what we want. Hey, guys, nice to see you all this evening. Appreciate it. And do us a favor, please, and share this with your groups so that all of our videos, because our goal here is to educate and to keep people from making huge mistakes that can cost them down the line.
And the one question I did want to ask is, there's a lot of misinformation out there about Annabelle and Amityville. Do you feel like sharing any of the most common false information about those cases?
Oh, my favorite, of course, happened, 2 summers ago? Well, for the Northern Hemisphere. I was down in Brazil at the time, and all of a sudden, the whole world went crazy because Annabelle supposedly escaped from the museum. Yeah, that never happened. But for about a month, I was doing interviews all over the world because people were so honestly afraid. I actually collected, I don't know how many memes of Annabelle out and about with her boyfriend Chucky, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, my favorite one was her wearing a bikini at the beach.
Oh, well, I don't know if favorite would be the right word for me. Why is it that, half the world, the half that doesn't know, thinks that Annabelle is this ugly porcelain doll. And of course, it's a Raggedy Ann doll. It stands about 3 feet tall, if it could stand.
Yeah. Well, I think she can, or at least from the stories.
Well, yeah, no, actually, it can't stand, but something animated it and allowed it to be in an upright position. Yes. Yeah, it's... Can you imagine coming home and having that thing waiting for you at the door?
No. I have little, like, they're about this tall, Raggedy Ann and Andy's, and I could just see those two greeting me at the door.
And I'll never understand why people are fans of Annabelle. We just had a woman contact us a couple of days ago. She had gone to see Annabelle at some kind of paranormal convention. And now she's being plagued by car problems, health problems. She's losing weight mysteriously. No, Annabelle is not a diet aid, and don't, try to hunt it down just so that'll happen to you. But I don't think that Annabelle has caused these problems. But I did talk to her about how to protect herself and about self-manifestation and how our own fear can get out of control and cause things to occur. Real, actual phenomena, not just, in your head kind of phenomena.
Right. And when it came to Annabelle, I know a lot of people already know the background stories because we talked about it before, but for those who don't, can you just kind of give a little bit of background?
Can I be that brief? I don't know. I'm long-winded, guys.
That's fine. We have 2 hours.
Here's the thing about Annabelle. The movies, of course, and I always say this every time I can, are fantasies. The Annabelle movies, there's nothing true about them at all. If anything, Annabelle 2 is based on lies that a medium had received, information that the medium had received, none of which was real. And Kelly is asking, do they still take Annabelle out
Mhm.
to places with that conjuring mirror? And yes, they do. They do. On occasion, about 3, 4 times a year. Um, Not what I think is a good idea, but it's not my choice. Anyway, it was around 1970, and there were two nursing students working at Hartford Hospital in Connecticut.
Mhm.
And one of them, her name was Donna, received a Raggedy Ann doll from her mother as a housewarming gift. And she really loved it. She really did. Um, Took it to bed with her, sat it down at the table with them when they ate their meals, like, Raggedy Ann's going to join us for dinner today. And one morning, they were sitting at the breakfast table, and the doll's arms levitated up onto the table. Now, this was somewhere between 68 and 70. And back then, things were different. It was flower power and the age of Aquarius. And their response was, "Oh, there must be a ghost in the doll. Let's have a seance." And they had many, many seances. They invited in their friend, who was a medium, and the medium was told that this was the spirit of a little girl named Annabelle, a 6-year-old girl who had been killed in front of the house in a car accident and was just looking for a family to love it. Now, these are two young nursing students and full of empathy, and they immediately embraced this doll.
Mhm.
And things would occasionally, there would be some phenomena like whispering or knocking noises, and they would think, "Oh, Annabelle wants to talk to us again," and they'd have another seance. But then they started finding little notes on parchment paper around the house, and written in crayon, which I think is in the Annabelle 2 movie. These messages, things like "miss me," "want to play." There was another one I can't recall off the top of my head, but they didn't own parchment paper or crayons, so this was manifesting without the materials in the home, which is pretty amazing, actually.
Mhm.
And they started to get a little weirded out. They felt like something was always watching them, and Annabelle wouldn't be where they left it in the morning when they went to work. They'd come home at night, and Annabelle could be standing at the door waiting for them. And then one Sunday afternoon, Donna's boyfriend was on the couch and he was taking a nap. And he woke up with a start and he said, "I just had a dream that Annabelle was on top of my chest, choking me to death." And he walked over to the doll, he picked it up, and he said, "You're just a stupid doll. You couldn't hurt anyone," and threw it across the room. As soon as he said that, there were 7 claw marks that had raked across his body, 3 on his chest and 4 on his belly, I believe. And the blood soaked right through his t-shirt. They were terrified, and they called the Episcopal Canon of Hartford. Um, and that man, basically a bishop for the Episcopal Church, got a hold of a local exorcist who contacted my grandparents and had my grandparents check it out for him. And as soon as my grandmother saw the dolls, she thought, "This is definitely not a child. This is something diabolical."
Mhm.
I have my own thoughts on that, and we can talk about that in a bit. But, and by the way, anybody who watches the original Warren Files episode on Annabelle will get a slightly different view on what I'm going to talk about today, because one of the things about the paranormal is we have to adapt to the new information that we receive. Otherwise, it isn't really a field of study. So my views on this have started to change a bit. Yes, Annabelle is still in the museum uh, at my grandparents' house. And anyway, my grandfather would often think things were demonic if it was something heavy and powerful. Again, my views on that have changed over the years, and I'm not sure how much is demonic and how much is something else. I've seen so many things that I have to be open-minded about what we're dealing with. And they told the Donna and her roommate that this thing was demonic. And of course, the girls were more than happy to get rid of the doll, and my grandparents brought it home with them. Now, for the longest time, my grandparents had only been doing this like 19 years at that point. I have got more than double that experience, plus their experience on top of my own. So they didn't really understand. And they had the doll sitting on a rocking chair in the basement. Their really, really spooky, disgusting basement. And for about 5 years, it sat there. And a year later, Father Bill Charbonneau, who's a friend of the family, my grandmother would bring me to midnight mass on Christmas Eve to Father Bill's church every year. It was not close to my house, so it was a treat that we got to go. And he was a young priest at that time, and he wanted to show off his new car to my grandparents and take them for a ride. And afterward, Father Bill said, Ed, I hear you got this doll that attacks people. And my grandfather said, yeah, Father, it's downstairs. Would you like to see it? So they went down in the basement, and it was also known as the Halloween room because year round it was decorated for Halloween. My grandfather just loved it. And Father Bill walks right over to it, picks it up, and throws it across the room and says, God is stronger than the devil. Well, yeah, God is stronger than the devil. But as my grandfather said, but no man is. And on his way home that evening, Father Bill was driving along, and this halo of white light came straight out of the sky and at his car. And just before he veered off the road and into a ditch, he swore he saw Annabelle in the halo of the light. And the car was completely destroyed, torn in half, as I recall, and his leg was broken. So Annabelle is very, very real and not something to be taken lightly. There are other stories as well, but that's a good start.
And Jennifer wanted to know, why don't they tell the real story in the movies?
Actually, I think in Conjuring 2, they actually do. It's just, come on. It's not that in-depth a story. Don't look at any of our movies as fact. Although the Conjuring movies are based on true cases, there's an awful lot of liberties taken, especially in Conjuring 2, which deals both with Amityville and the case in Enfield, England. None of those details are correct.
Okay. And then, if Annabelle is not real, why are people so afraid of her, and why such a huge story about her, and she is locked up for what reason?
Oh, no. Annabelle's real. No. Annabelle is definitely dangerous. Don't get confused by what I said earlier. No. I now wonder if it isn't something called an egregore. And Heather can talk about the Philip experiment again and explain how this can happen. But basically, they had this story that Annabelle is a child, but as they became closer and closer to it and invested more and more energy into it, they started to also get creeped out by what they were creating. And perhaps that's when it turned negative, that it was their own energy that they were putting into it, their own fears that manifested in this thing. I don't know. But that I have an easier time with.
And then one question that we get a lot when I check our messenger is the museum. That is not really up and running for guests to come visit it, but you don't. Actually, the Warren Legacy Foundation has no control over Annabelle, because that's the one
No,
question I get.
absolutely true. Um, Annabelle is the property of my mother and her husband, but the museum was never. I actually hate the term museum, to be honest. It was never open to the public, the general public. It was always by special invitation or by, simple small presentations that they would do for guests. It's more of a prison, more of a place to protect people from those things. And I think the worst legacy that has come out of my grandparents' work is this mania that people have for collecting haunted objects, which we just got contacted again yesterday by a woman who cleans out houses before they're renovated, and she has some abilities. So she'll go around, and if she finds an object that feels haunted to her, she collects it. She's allowed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's got an entire separate building full of these objects. Now, all of a sudden, she gets an attachment, things are bothering her, she's getting hurt, and she doesn't want to accept that it's these haunted objects that she's got. She wants to blame it on her boyfriend and her son drinking in a graveyard years ago. You know, if you don't cooperate with us, we can't help you. And if you're not willing to get rid of what's hurting you, we can't help you. I don't want the objects. I'm not a collector. I wasn't asking for the objects. I know how to get rid of them, and I can help her do that. But she doesn't want to give them up. And as long as she's holding on to the things that are hurting her, there's not a thing anybody can do.
Mm-hmm. Okay. How can you prove that Annabelle is real? Do you have real videos of it?
There are no videos, as far as I'm aware. But I know people who've been hurt by Annabelle. So I do believe that this, and plus I can feel the bad energy when I'm in there, but it isn't, I've never touched Annabelle. I've never opened the door because I've never had a need to. I treat Annabelle like a cobra, a poisonous snake, and I treat it with respect. I don't have fear of it. I just treat it with respect.
Okay. And I know Zach Bagans is your favorite. Have you seen the episode where he touched Annabelle, and what are your thoughts on that?
I did not see it. I've seen two episodes of his in the past. One in England where he had a guy come in who called himself a demonologist, a term I really don't like. And at the end, they have a circle of mediums inviting spirits in to take them over. And like, wow. I don't believe Zach Bagans believes in the paranormal. He's a wonderful showman, wonderful entertainer. He's the modern day paranormal P.T. Barnum. But don't do what he says or does, because you'll get hurt. Hello?
I muted my mic. Why did they make Annabelle look porcelain when in fact she's a rag doll?
I'm guessing that it's because whoever owns the trademark to Raggedy Ann doesn't want to be associated with a horrific thing when they've got 1980s cartoons of Raggedy Ann and Andy running in fields. The last thing they want is a horror Raggedy Ann.
And it made her look scarier too.
Oh yeah. Let's be honest. In the first movie, this man gets this disgusting porcelain doll for his pregnant wife. I mean, what guy would do something that stupid? All right, maybe I just answered that question. He's a guy.
And why does Annabelle belong to your mom and not the Warren Legacy Foundation?
Well, she's the direct heir of my grandmother and grandfather.
Okay. There's a lot of talk about moving the museum. Do you know if they're going to move it?
There's been talk about that since before my grandmother died. But honestly, Tony is about 75, 76 years old. I doubt they're going to do that. And if they do, it'll be more because they want to sell my grandmother's house.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Sell it with the objects, no.
No, better someone else than me. I'll take on the responsibility if called on, but I'm not looking forward to it.
What is the proper protocol in getting rid of a haunted object?
Okay. Take it far away from any house. Really, not in your property at all, far away from any house. Dig a hole about a foot deep and consecrate the ground, put it in the hole, consecrate the ground with either blessed salt or holy water, cover it up again, walk away, never return. And the negative energy will leach off into the earth and we won't have to deal with it again. Do not burn things. Do not throw them away. They have a way of coming back anyway. And when you burn something, all you've done is release its anchor. And now it can find a new way to come through to us. So don't do that either.
Okay. And we are investigating a 6,000 square foot museum this Saturday. What is the best way to test objects for attachments when there are so many artifacts?
A psychic, somebody who's very good at psychometry, so that they can feel the energies coming off of the objects. But even then, for me personally, I don't believe, and I'm a psychic, I don't believe anything I feel without evidence. For instance, I had a case in Costa Rica, and I went around the girl's bedroom and I'm feeling everything that's in the room. And I get to this one doll and I'm like, wow, that doesn't feel good at all. And it turns out that the girl was having dreams of this doll coming to life and attacking her. And it had been taken by her aunt for 3 months. And when it came back to them, that's when they started having so many problems. So there's my evidence to back up what I was feeling. I ended up taking the doll, and one of my teammates buried it far from any house up in the mountains of around San Jose.
And do you believe that even though objects have attachments, we feed our energy to make them either weaker or stronger?
Absolutely. Absolutely, certainly true. Yes. Many people own haunted objects and never have anything happen to them. It's the ones who have those underlying conditions that we talk about every single time I talk. That underlying vulnerability to the paranormal, whatever it is, mental illness, negativity, anxiety, whatever your particular opening is that these things can feed off of. So you can do that. My grandmother used to say, like attracts like. If you put out positive energy, you get back positive energy. If you put out negative energy, you get back negative energy. When we first talk to a client, one of the first things we tell them to do is clean out all the clutter in your house. Clean it up, get rid of anything you're not actually using. Make sure your home is spick and span. And stop watching all of these paranormal programs. Don't watch horror films or depressing movies. Don't listen to death metal. Put positive things into your home. Don't fight at home. Make love, laugh, dance, sing. Those are what you want to be doing to raise the vibrations of your home. And that will diminish the power of these things.
Okay. And do you think it's possible to transfer the negative energy from Annabelle to another object, such as the Conjuring doll?
It's an interesting idea. I don't think so. I've never heard of a case of an attachment moving from one object to another. Having said that, Heather, if you have, please say so.
No, I haven't. like we've talked before, it could be done because, the attachment of the energy going from one place to another, transferring of energy, but that would take, I think, a lot of spiritual push to get it to go from one place and to manifest it into another object. And
Yeah, I mean, I've known people who say they've been visited by Annabelle. There was actually one kind of compelling case. A 20-year-old in the backwoods of Tennessee, completely uneducated. She had seen the Annabelle movie, um, but didn't know what the real doll looked like or anything. And I had been working with her, and she had said that she had had this vision. She was sitting on her couch, and there was a Raggedy Ann doll sitting next to her at the other end of the couch, and she didn't know what that was. So, yeah.
okay, is it true that people who have knocked on her case have had bad things happen? She read a story about a guy on a motorcycle that didn't believe in Annabelle, and he knocked on her case, and he wrecked with his girlfriend and died, but she survived.
I've heard that story. I've even heard my grandfather tell that story. I have never seen any evidence that it's true. My suspicion is that this is actually the story of Father Bill, who got in the car accident after challenging the doll, and that Father Bill probably at that time didn't want my grandfather to continue telling the story. Now they've all passed away, and it really doesn't matter. There was another time where a homicide detective was visiting the house. My grandmother would help assist on cases occasionally. And afterward, he wanted to take a tour of the museum with my grandfather. And he said to my grandfather, of all the things in the museum, the one that attracts me the most is that doll up on the wall. And as luck would have it, my grandfather was then called to take a phone call upstairs. So he said, look, I'll leave you down here, but don't touch anything. My grandfather wasn't upstairs for more than 5 minutes, and this man comes up running up the stairs, white as a ghost. And he said, I can't talk about it. I can't tell you what happened, but I'll tell Lorraine as long as she promises never to tell anyone. And my grandmother never did. But when my grandfather went into the museum, everything was torn apart. And the door to Annabelle's case was opened. And my grandfather knew immediately that he had been drawn to the doll. He had opened it, touched it. His energy had interacted with the dolls, and all hell broke loose.
And have you ever touched a haunted object? And if so, what happened?
Many, 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 many times. It depends. If I'm protecting myself ahead of time, with the white light, and I know what I'm up to, then really there's nothing. Other times, if I'm using my abilities to suss out where these negative energies are coming from, then yeah, I can get a headache or even a psychic hangover the next day because I'm so drained. But I've never had a spiritual attachment. I've always felt protected.
Okay. And when are you coming back home?
Define home. My home is the world.
Okay. Hold on, scrolling through all the comments here to get to more questions.
Has any psychics been attacked in the museum? If so, why were they attacked and not Lorraine? Well, actually, you have to remember that it's your intention to make contact that is the problem. My grandmother could certainly feel the energies in the place. Believe me, the museum, even in the hottest days of summer, is always cold. Always. My grandfather would sleep in there on hot summer nights because of that. And I have known many psychics who have said that they were overwhelmed by the energies in the place. But my grandmother, at least in the time I knew her, she really knew how to take care of herself.
Okay. And what do you say to those who start summoning demons to help with cases?
Gee, thanks, Kenneth. Here's the thing. I've gone to an Umbanda temple in Portugal. It's an Afro-Brazilian religion, and some of the spirits they work with are these fallen spirits. In their belief system, there are these, we'll call them fallen angels or demons if you want, who are looking for redemption. And they are trying to help lost souls get out of the darkness. I have seen enough to know that can be effective. Having said that, if you come from a Christian background and you're trying to do that, you're going to get your ass hurt because the paranormal manifests according to your cultural and religious beliefs. Now, that opens up a whole much more interesting discussion about what is the paranormal. But we can do that on another point.
Okay. And how do you protect yourself with the white light?
Oh, that's easy. All right. Here we go, guys. I want you to all close your eyes. Don't fall asleep on us. We still have another hour and a half to go here. But close your eyes and take some deep cleansing breaths in through the nose, hold it for a few seconds, and out through the mouth. And once you've done that 3 or 4 times and you feel really centered, I want you to picture this warm, white, loving light deep inside of your chest. It doesn't matter if you can actually see the light. That doesn't matter. This is a ritual to focus your faith and your intention to call on God or goodness or the universe, whatever you want to term it as, to protect you. And I want you to picture this warm, white, loving light spreading through your chest, down through your body, through your legs and feet, warm and tingling, going up through your shoulders and down through your arms, up into your head, and then spilling out of the pores of your skin like the most brilliant white light in the universe. So bright that you cannot be seen inside of it. You just picture in your head white light. And once you've got that surrounding yourself, you can then use it to surround your loved ones, your home. If you suspect there's something very negative, you can project the white light at that. And the best thing to do is do this before and after a case, and also when you're in bed at your most rested in the morning and in the night, as a way of calling on God's protection. Just like evil must be invited in, so must good. Now, just like evil, you don't necessarily have to be the one that calls it in. Other people can pray for you, and that'll work just fine as well. And the same thing with evil. Sometimes it's not you that calls in the bad thing. You're just the one that has to suffer from the repercussions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. As a person with bipolar, it's sometimes hard to separate the voices, but I hear stuff at 2 and 3 a.m. almost every night. Have you had people talk about this with you? And she also hears walking around and keys rattling.
Okay. That's the kind of thing I'd like to talk to you more about. There's a high probability that you are sensitive and that you're also you may have mental health issues, and I'm not denying that. But mental health issues are also a very good way of opening yourself to the paranormal. And it may be that you're just picking up on a ghost that's in your home. Most people live in this bubble where they are completely blind to what's actually around them. You may be one of those people who is not blind to it. My grandfather had a theory that the 3 o'clock hour was the devil's hour because, according to tradition, Jesus died on the cross at 3:15 in the afternoon. Now, time didn't exist back then the way it does now. So that's not true, obviously. Um, we didn't measure time that way.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, because people believe that now, that manifestation does happen from 3 to 4 o'clock all the time. I've always found that that's also when we're in our deepest REM sleep. And that's when you're more open to the paranormal as well. You, when you're dreaming, you're closer to the astral plane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just shared the link for if anybody who needs help, they can fill out that form and we'll reach out to them as
Yes,
soon as we
please.
get the form. And then Sarah wants to know if you find certain frequencies enhance the white light.
It's an interesting question, and it's certainly something I would love to figure out myself. Frequency runs through all of reality. Everything is vibration. So it would make perfect sense to me that it would enhance or detract. But the science for me, I'm not an expert on that. I would need to talk to actual experts about something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you think your mom would ever publish your grandfather's journals?
My grandfather didn't have journals. He would make audio recordings. I would love for them to do that, but I don't know if they ever will.
And here's another one from Kenneth with a bunch of
Yes,
big
the
words.
Necronomicon, the Telemonicon, and the Divermus Mysterious, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Absolutely should not be used by people with mental illness, people who are more open to negative influences. Um, Millions of people use the Ouija board and never get hurt. But it is Russian roulette,
Mm-hmm.
because if you're open to it, you can invite something in. And the same thing with the Necronomicon or what have you. It's your intentions and your openness to the paranormal that determine whether or not we get a phone call.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then I was going to switch over to Amityville, but we have another question. Every time I enter a place that has a faucet, they start to leak water. I really think that's supernatural stuff. What do you think about that?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That I need to really have a conversation with you and understand what else is going on. If it's only water leaking, coincidence would be my guess. Here's a strange thing that happened, and maybe somebody else could figure this one out for us. I'm wearing a pair of pants today that a few months ago I fell down and I ripped the knee open. I was outside my apartment, and I only own two pair of pants. So it's hard not to know what I own and what I'm doing with it. And I had to wash my other pants, so I put these on for the first time in ages, and there's no hole in the in the knee anymore. Can someone explain that to me? Because to me that really seems fairly paranormal too.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure that one out after you shared that story.
I know. I've never seen anything like. I mean, I have an easier time explaining, being thrown across a room on a bed with my cousin and having the bed break into pieces than I do believing that my pants self-repaired. And Sarah, honestly, nobody sewed these up. I mean, who would have gotten a hold of them, and who could have fixed jeans so perfectly that you could not tell that there had been a rip?
Okay. Jennifer said she had a mental breakdown in 2020, and that was when she was diagnosed with bipolar. I have told my family I hear things all my life and see things. The doctor just thought I was making it up, so then I don't need to ignore my senses. I think she's trying to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. We have a psychic support group that can help guide you. You should absolutely continue with your doctor's treatments, but we can also offer some guidance. We would never tell you not to follow doctor's advice, ever.
Okay, and then I wanted to switch over to Amityville real quick. A lot of people know the story mostly from the movies.
Oh, wait a minute.
Oh,
Philip Wyatt
oh,
said something that's really good. That the person who's got the dripping faucets,
mhm,
it could be that they're subconsciously using psychokinesis or telekinesis to turn on the water. So
mhm,
yeah, that's certainly that I can understand as a very good explanation.
mhm. And then Brian says maybe you manifested your genes being fixed.
No, because I just accepted that I was going to be wearing these raggedy hobo pants.
And there was a question actually before we even move on to Amityville that I definitely wanted to get back to. What have you learned from your grandparents that you would like to share?
Always help anybody in need if you can. Uh, give of yourself, never charge for your services. Um, so many things, really. Uh, Continue to be happy and put joy into what you do, love into what you do, faith into what you do. Um, I also learned what not to do from mistakes that they made or things that were appropriate at their time, but certainly are not today, like publicizing cases. We would never do that. But back in the day, they did it all the time. And that was more because how are people going to know to find them to get help if they don't tell their stories? So
Mhm.
I understand that. At the time, I didn't.
Okay. And this just sounds like your grandmother. Maybe she told them for you because she's like, no grandson of mine will wear ripped jeans or go outside looking like that.
You know, she has appeared numerous times and helped in other ways. But I don't know. I don't recall. I mean, baking, cooking, gift buying, taking care of the home, decorating. That she was amazing at. Whether or not she could actually sew, I never. I have no idea.
I was able to play a Ouija board alone, but it was, oh, I should put my glasses on.
But it was ripped from me before I was able to say goodbye. Could this negative occurrence affect my life currently? I was a teenager. All right. Here's the thing. These rules that supposedly exist for the Ouija board, yes, you must set boundaries when dealing with the spirit world. And all religions use rituals to do that. Um, but for me and for my grandparents, Ouija boards are a different kind of thing. You know, you can use a pendulum to work with your psychic abilities and try to get answers from yourself. But with a Ouija board, the only thing you're doing, your sole intention is to contact the spirit world. Um, Nothing else I can think of does that. You know, even automatic writing can be yourself, or the tarot certainly doesn't have to have anything to do with the spirit world. But Ouija boards do, seances do. And when your intention is to open that door, you can put all the protections you want up. But as soon as you open that door, you've thrown away your protection, as far as my understanding of how things work. So I would not recommend ever using Ouija board. Having said that, if this happened years ago and you've had no other phenomena since then, I certainly would not worry about it being paranormal. You know, we all have difficult times in our lives. You should never blame the paranormal for your difficulties without overwhelming evidence. Always assume what you're dealing with is natural.
Mhm. And what is the future of your grandparents' collection when your mom and stepfather transition?
I really don't know yet. I assume it'll be my responsibility, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Um, we'll see what happens.
Okay, and I'm trying to bring up a quick photo because this is one question I get a lot of. Let me see. And this is from Amityville. What are your thoughts on this photo? Because a lot of people say that it was faked.
Right. Yeah. Well, some people actually say it's me. I promise you that was not me. Um, that photo was taken by a Channel 5 news photographer. It was not taken by my grandparents. It was taken, my grandparents had been invited into the Amityville house by Channel 5. I always say Channel 5 News, but honestly, it was the Tom Snyder show. And I just, for years, I couldn't remember Tom Snyder's name. Sorry, Mr. Snyder. Uh, and the night, I'm going to go back here. The night my grandparents were invited, it was just after 3 o'clock in the morning. My grandfather was in his office in the museum, at the back of the museum, and he was working late. And all of a sudden, he heard that there's like this corridor that leads down to the museum. The museum used to be an art studio that they had converted. And there's this dungeon door basically that comes open from the basement of my grandparents' house, that spooky Halloween room. And you go down the corridor and then into the museum. And my grandfather heard that heavy door open and heard 3 footsteps, and he assumed it was my grandmother bringing him coffee or something. So he said, "Hey, Lorraine, I'm back here. Come on back." And then everything was quiet, and he realized he had only heard 3 footsteps. And it got really, really cold in the office. He could see his breath. The light on the desk light started flickering on and off. And he heard this whirlwind of energy coming down the hallway. And he realized he was about to confront something pretty awful. He grabbed his holy water and a crucifix, and he stepped out into the museum as this thing came smashing through the museum door and swirled around and then came to rest over on the other side of the museum right near Annabelle. And my grandfather immediately, before it could start becoming more physical, advanced on it, saying, "By the power of Jesus Christ, I command you to be gone," and holding up the crucifix. And the thing took a step toward my grandfather. My grandfather threw the holy water on it in the shape of the cross. This thing spun around again, went down through the corridor, and my grandfather immediately knew it was going after my grandmother. He didn't go out into the corridor chasing it. He knew that he didn't want to be trapped in such a small location with this thing. These small areas, energy can coalesce more easily. So he went out the back entrance and outside and started running toward the back kitchen door. And as he's doing this, he's hearing animals screeching and crying and fighting right outside, even though he knew there were none. And while he's running, my grandmother was in the bedroom. She was staying awake, waiting for him. And she was in bed with a couple of the dogs and reading a biography of Padre Pio. And Padre Pio suffered the wounds of Christ for 25 years. An incredible, if you get the opportunity, please learn about him. There's a wonderful YouTube miniseries that I recommend on Padre Pio, and it's in several languages, including English, Spanish, Italian. Definitely worth checking out. Made me cry. But my grandmother was reading a biography of his, and she heard this freight train of energy coming at her. And it came up the stairs, it slammed around the kitchen, went through the dining room, in the living room, and she was terrified. She got up on her knees on the bed, and she didn't know what to do as this black mass came into the bedroom, the dogs cowering behind her on the bed. And she grabbed her rosary, I believe, and she thrust it in front of her. And she's, "By the power of Jesus Christ, I command you to be gone." And my grandfather came smashing through the back door, in the kitchen, and this thing swirled around, went out the bedroom door, around the corner, through the living room, and as my grandfather was running to the front through the kitchen, it went up the chimney just before the kitchen, and was gone. And that's when they knew that this was not going to be a normal case. So when they were called to the house, they had to go to Kathy Lutz's mother's house first, because the Lutzes would not meet them at the house. They wanted to never go back there again. And they had never believed in the paranormal. Something had terrified them so much, including this Hell's Angel, George Lutz, that he was not going back for anything. He wanted nothing out of that house except for one thing. He asked my grandfather to grab the deed, the paperwork, so they could sell the house and get rid of it. And when my grandparents went there, Channel 5 asked them to do a seance with 2 other mediums. And my grandmother tried, but nothing happened. And then they broke up. And my grandmother, as she was going up the stairs, she said it was like walking against a raging river of energy. And she was pushing against the stream. When they got up to the landing here, which you see here, a photographer took a quick snapshot, and it was that child looking out from the bedroom door. Now, people have compared it to John DeFeo, but although it does look similar, my grandfather said this is not a human spirit. This is a demon. And you can tell by the eyes that the eyes were not human. Again, this photo was taken by a news photographer, not by my grandparents. That is the historical fact. Mm-hmm. So, no, there's nothing fake about that at all. While my grandmother was dealing with that stuff, my grandfather went down in the basement. And he was by himself at first. And he said it felt like this heavy, wet blanket was thrown on top of his back and knocked him to his knees. And it was somewhere around that point that he also discovered this little door, red door. I guess it was behind a washing machine, I think. And when they opened it, they found inside all of these satanic sigils on the wall and animal bones and other things arranged in a ritual fashion inside. And they realized that Ron DeFeo, who had murdered his entire family, had been performing satanic rituals there. They left everything. I mean, they left the food in the refrigerators, the gun collection, the money collection. They wanted nothing from that house, nothing at all. So people, want to say that this isn't a true case. It was done for money. The truth is, the Lutzes never received a penny for anything. Their lawyer, who had set everything up, had tried to take control of it all, and it ended up in court forever. As far as I know, it was never resolved to their satisfaction. And it certainly wasn't something cooked up over a bottle of wine with the author. That's ridiculous.
Would it be fair to say that the spiritual world and afterlife are different, same, but of different levels of learning, such as Ouija boards?
Can you say that again? I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. Would it be fair to say that the spiritual world and afterlife are different, but yet the same, but of different levels of learning?
As we go through lifetimes, and both my grandparents and I believe in multiple lifetimes, your goal is to get closer and closer to God. If you think of God as this white light burning bright, you get as close to that light as you're comfortable getting, with the ultimate goal of becoming one with the light. There are some souls that are so black that they separate themselves from that light. It burns them and they can't get close. And for them, they create their own hell in the darkness. I don't believe in biblical hell. Uh, well, let's call it what it really is, Dante's hell, because that image of hell that we've got isn't biblical. Um, Historically, even the idea of Satan has changed over thousands of years. It was the Satan, and the Satan was a title for a prosecutor, spiritual prosecutor, who would test your faith. And even in the New Testament, when Jesus goes into the wilderness, Satan is there testing his faith. You know, throw yourself off this mountain. God will protect you. He'll send angels. You know, so again, it was fulfilling a need. In Job, the same thing. In Job, Satan is a prince of heaven who walks into the court of heaven and says, "Hey, you know, I hear you got this guy who's super faithful. Let me test him." And God said, "Okay, go ahead. Just don't kill him." Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that. You know what? I apologize. I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Have you ever seen the documentary My Amityville Horror by the Sun?
Oh no, I haven't. I did meet him once at a picnic, family picnic. I met all the Lutzes. They were nice people, but I haven't seen the documentary. I don't like paranormal television. I've never really gotten into any of that stuff because most of it's fake. Having said that, I do believe that he was being as accurate as he could be about what had happened. I don't doubt his word, even though I haven't seen it. I don't doubt his word for it.
I've always heard of holy water being used for protection. Has holy oil ever been used? If so, is it just as effective?
Yes, absolutely. Matter of fact, I prefer it. I use holy oil when I do a spiritual cleansing of a home, and I leave the sign of the cross above every window and door. That seals the room. After you've driven out the negative energy, it seals that room so negative energy can't come back in.
And was Amityville the worst case your grandparents ever faced?
Of course, according to them, absolutely true. Yes. I would argue that the Maurice Theriault case would have been worse because it resulted in an actual death. Having said that, you know, Ron DeFeo did murder his entire family, so maybe my grandparents were taking that into consideration as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then since you brought it up, Kenneth asked, can you please talk about Maurice?
Yeah. Is that something we should hop into right now?
Oh, go right ahead.
All right. That's in a book called Satan's Harvest, which was written by two Boston reporters, Boston Globe, I believe. And for anybody who doesn't know, that's a very prestigious newspaper. And they did a wonderful job with that. But Maurice had been horribly abused growing up. His father was a true monster. Maurice was not able to read or write, although he was the only one in his family that could speak French. He's the character that people know from the Nun movie, the one that call Frenchie. Now, there's a shred of truth to the Nun movie. The Nun itself, Valak, is an invention of James Wan, the writer, producer, director, who was looking for a way to join the Amityville case with the Enfield case and came up with Valak. But I did it again. I'm getting old. Where the hell was I?
Yeah, you were talking about Maurice. And
thank you. Yeah, sorry. Oh my goodness. All right, so look, this is awful. But when Maurice was like 12 years old and his family were farmers, He went into the barn and caught his father having sex with a farm animal, and his father made him do the same. Just one of many different abuses. Many years later, Maurice got a phone call from his father, and his father said, Maurice, I just want you to know that I love you. And the first time he had ever said that to Maurice. And he put the phone down. And while Maurice listened, he picked up his rifle. He went into the next room. He killed Maurice's mother, and then he killed himself while Maurice listened. They started having phenomena in the house. Maurice was out in the field, and he found these two pieces of wood that were glowing, and he brought them back to the house, and he turned it into a cross and hung it up on the wall over his bed, and the cross disappeared, but the shining, glowing cross shape remained there for weeks. They had a Turkish coffee set, one of those metal tiny coffee sets they have on a nice ornate plate and everything. And let's say this is a curtain rod. Well, the plate was balanced like that on the rod. It's impossible. It could not have been counterweighted to stay like that. And yet there it was in front of them. Words starting appearing scratched in his back in blood, and they would be in French. His family would read it to him, and then he would translate it. And they were getting very afraid. They were being attacked, and he started to come under possession. And they contacted the church, and my grandparents got involved. And I went on that first day to meet them. My grandfather, after the initial interview, and I was still in college, said, I think this is your father, and let's go to the graveyard, and you can forgive your father and tell him that you love him so that he'll be at rest. And as we were all there, and there were a number of researchers there that day, as Maurice was crying in front of the grave, telling his father that he loved him, I watched him get punched and heard him get punched so hard under the chin, whap, that it knocked him backwards about 3 meters, or about 10 feet. And he landed on his back flat. After that, my grandfather said, all right, Chris, I want you to hang out at the house as often as you can. There were 3 other researchers who did the same. Me and my partner at the time was Ray Jefferson. And then there were 2 other guys. Al was one of them. He was a cop. Can't remember the other guy's name. Sorry. But we would all work together. One time, it was early spring, and I was there with Ray. Nancy was Maurice's wife, and Maurice, and we were in the greenhouse. And Maurice started to complain that he was getting really cold. And I just was like, well, it's chilly. Walk over to the heater and get warmed up. As he's walking over, though, he turns around and he's staring at me from about 20 feet away, something like that. And I could see even from there that his eyes had these serpent-like slits, like snakes. And I told Ray to get Nancy back to the house. And I advanced on Maurice, and I was making the sign of the cross in front of me, saying, by the power of Jesus Christ, I command you to be gone. And after a number of minutes, couldn't say for certain how many, 2 or 3 probably, he came out of it. He'd been drooling blood like he would do, tears of blood, the whole thing. And he said that he felt something cold and wet on his back. So I lifted up his shirt, and in his T-shirt were 3 bloody crosses that had soaked through the T-shirt. I lifted up the T-shirt, and there's blood on his back, but there's no cut. It's like, what the hell's going on? So I said, look, I need the t-shirt. I have to have it examined. So we walked back to the house, and I watched him take off his shirt, take off his t-shirt. He handed me the t-shirt, and the blood was gone. Still on his back, but it wasn't on his shirt anymore. We had two different rituals that we had to perform the day of his exorcism. The first, we went to another house in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, and we did a complete cleansing of a poltergeist case with Bishop McKenna. And then we went and we did the exorcism. My grandparents by that time were in their 50s, and they didn't do hands-on. They never did exorcisms. They would assist, but they would never actually do one. And it was me and Ray and Al and the other fella surrounding Maurice. And I was between Maurice and Bishop McKenna. I was the biggest. And even before the exorcism got started, I'll never forget my grandmother saying to my grandfather, Ed, why don't you have a banana? Maybe you have low potassium, because he was having chest pains. The next morning, I got a phone call at college, and my grandfather was in the hospital. He had had a massive heart attack. So during the exorcism, first, Maurice started rocking back and forth, a lot of pain in his belly, and he started drooling blood, and tears of blood were coming down his eyes. That would happen often. And then he got really quiet, and he sat up, and he just looked at Bishop McKenna. And Bishop McKenna was demanding, demon, tell me your name. Demon, tell me your name. And Maurice, or the thing inside of Maurice, said, I am what I am, which is what God had said in the burning bush to Moses. Kind of a sacrilegious thing to say. And we did manage to do the exorcism. Well, Bishop did. We were just there to protect him. And for a couple of years, everything was fine. But unfortunately, at that point, we didn't understand the link between the paranormal and psychological issues. And the traumas that Maurice had been subjected to were never addressed. And so a couple of years later, he came back under possession. Nancy reached out to my grandparents for help, but before they could get there, Maurice met her at the house, waiting for her one night as she came home from work. And as she got out of the car, he shot her with his shotgun, blew off her arm, dragged her bleeding into the kitchen, sat her at the table. And then for minutes, several minutes, just sat at the table with her with the gun in his hand. And she thought she was dead. And at the last second, he turned the shotgun on himself and blew his head off. My grandfather believed that he had overcome the demon and had freed himself in that manner. I don't know. It's not the only time we've lost someone. And I hope it's the last time, but given the nature of the world, I'm sure there'll be others, unfortunately. Paranormal isn't anything to mess with. It's not something to take as a hobby. If this isn't a calling, if you're not truly faithful and believe that you're protected and take steps to be protected, you're going to expose yourself to things that can really get you hurt. We've had so many researchers, people who did this, because they're fascinated, who then get attachments and get hurt. So don't ever take this work lightly, please.
Okay. And moving back to Amityville, and is there another family living there, and are they experiencing any paranormal activity?
There have been many families who have lived there over the years. Nobody seems to last for very many years, 2 or 3 at a time. The house was actually moved from one location to another. So there's the question of, is it the house or is it the land that's haunted? And the reporter a female reporter who had gone with my grandparents on that initial visit, has followed up with all of the families that have lived there over the years. And she said that the last owners were a couple in their 40s, and that the man had been in perfect health and was, had no problems. And all of a sudden, he just dropped dead of a heart attack, and the woman blamed the house for it, which is why it went on sale a couple of years ago.
Okay. Interested in learning your thoughts on your grandparents' work with Annalise Michael.
Annalise Mitchell. They didn't work on that case at all. That's the case that's known as the Exorcism of Audrey Rose, I believe, from Hollywood. In reality, the girl had over 60 exorcisms performed on her in Germany. And she had a long history of mental health issues. And over the very long time that they were doing this, there wasn't any medical observation to make sure that the girl was taken care of. And she died of dehydration and malnutrition. So, pretty awful.
Okay.
She also, by the way, said that she was haunted by Hitler, Nero, and I think it was Asterith or Asmodeus. I can't recall which of those two it supposedly was. But that's a good example of what I mean when I say that it's cultural, these manifestations. Because for a German girl growing up with European history, Nero is certainly the epitome of evil. And the same is true. Is that me? Yes, that's me.
I think that's you, it's not me.
Yeah. You'd think my best friend, who also happens to be a board member, would know that we're in the middle of a show.
Oops.
Anyway.
It goes to show he's not watching.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. But, Nero and Hitler would be the epitome of evil for her. So that manifestation makes perfect sense.
Okay. And then for Amityville, do you believe that the entities reside in the home or on the land can prevent the living from purchasing the property?
Well, people do purchase it. And then many of them are hurt by it. Not all, but many of them. I don't know. People have complained about the house. People have complained about the land. When they split it up, did they double the haunting?
I'd be curious as to who's actually living on the property now, not just in the home.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I've never visited. I have no interest. If I'm not called in to help, then I don't see a reason to go there.
Okay. Why do so many people take pictures with Annabelle even when your mom has warned against it and she doesn't like it, the doll, and why is it allowed by the museum?
Because my mother hates the paranormal. She's not a psychic. She's avoided the paranormal her whole life. Just why she ever let me go on a case at 16 years old, I can't even begin to imagine. But yeah, she hates it, and she hates Annabelle. But having said that, Tony is the head of the New England Society for Psychic Research, and he is the one that says what happens with the doll. And my mother always will support him.
Okay, and Philip wants to know, going as soon as I can get it to come up, with Maurice, could he be creating the phenomena himself due to stress or like a poltergeist agent?
From what I saw, there were things going on there that were outside of him. For instance, again, the bloody words in French on his back when he can't read or write. So who did that when nobody else spoke French? There was also an apparition of a woman that had appeared to him. When those kind of things happen, and when there's information that comes that is not available to the family, then I start to question that we're definitely dealing with something outside of them. It's not just self-manifestation.
And Sarah wants you to discuss more about psychological states and the susceptibility to paranormal activity.
Well, we've handled that many times, but for instance, people on the autistic spectrum are often far more psychic, far more powerful than you could imagine. And they can manifest it when they don't know what they're doing. It can come out as poltergeist activity often. We have a doctor on staff retired doctor, who was working for years in a criminally insane asylum. And she would often witness paranormal phenomena around them. There's an openness that comes with that vulnerability, that especially when they're negative, that can manifest in a very powerful way. Your fear is the real danger there. And it's one of the things that we try to teach people about is never jump to conclusions that what you're dealing with is paranormal. Always look for the normal explanation first. Always.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. And someone wants to talk about the Smurl case.
Okay, sure. What would you like to talk about?
He just says he wants to talk about it. He heard it was a crazy one.
It was. Yeah, I worked on that one as well. I was 20 for that case. And again, I would go with my partner, Ray. I would also go with a couple of other people. And it was a lot of phenomena, odd phenomena. I remember one thing that for me was odd at the time, but I understand now is actually not that uncommon. Mrs. Schmerl had to go into the hospital because something had started to really bother her in her belly. And it turned out that she had a partially digested twin that she had absorbed in the womb and carried her whole life. And it was like this tangled, hairy mass of tissue. Gross. There was an afternoon, and we used tape recorders at the time, cassette recorders. And it was a duplex. On one side were the grandparents, and on the other side were the Schmerls and their kids. And I was on the parents' side, and I was playing or recording with the tape recorder. And when I played it back, I kept hearing winking sounds. It was like, wow. The husband was attacked sexually, I believe. It was a horrific case. It really was. But it did get solved, thank God. Is there going to be a part 4 of The Conjuring? As long as these movies are making money, I have a feeling Hollywood is not going to give up their cash cow. So I don't have anything to do with the movies at all.
Okay, I'm putting the link in the comments for anyone who wants to fill out the form, but someone wants to know if they wanted to join the Legacy Foundation for Paranormal Research. Can you explain how they might do that?
Sure. Well, you could explain how they contact through the link, but we're not just looking for researchers anymore. If you bring something else to the table that the foundation can use to help us get our message out, then yeah, we're going to look at you as well, whether it be as a networker or videographer of some sort, all sorts of different talents we look for, translators, things like that, medical professionals, scientists. But our We do have a code of ethics that everyone is expected to follow. Our focus is always on the client. And if we don't feel that you are appropriate for working with people and helping people, then unless you've got other talents that we can use to help them, to help get our message across, really, then you would not be appropriate for the foundation. It's always the clients first, always.
And then, so she wants to know, how do we help our pets recover and protect them when they have protected and shielded us from attacks?
Although I know that they can be frightened, and yes, sometimes they get killed. Overall, they don't seem to be affected the way we are overall. But you can use the white light. Like I had explained earlier, once you've manifested it around yourself, you can surround your loved ones, your home, your pets, or your loved ones, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's all about intention, which we've
Absolutely.
talked about several times in the past.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And I've been trying to find the photo, but the photo of the moose from Amityville.
Oh, I love that photo so much. Yeah, that's there's a famous photo of my grandmother in the family room, and there's this moose hanging on the wall, moose head. And if you really look at it, you can see what looks like the silhouette of a man's head wearing a monk's cowl and looking directly at my grandmother. And when you compare it to a photo of Padre Pio, you can see that's exactly who it is. As a matter of fact, go back to the Schmerl case for a second. I was in the Schmerl's bedroom and I was praying, and all of a sudden the room filled up with the smell of roses, a sure sign that Padre Pio was there. He is a very active spirit. He has been running around helping people forever. And he has helped us on a number of cases. So there's a picture of this moose, and in the antlers you see Padre Pio looking at my grandmother. Now there is also, and my grandparents never noticed this. I can't imagine how they missed it. But on the tip of one of the antlers, you also see the head of a man with a long hair and a beard. And when you compare that to a photo of Ron DeFeo Jr., the killer, it's him. Now, having said that, he was alive at the time. So what we're looking at there is something diabolical manifesting to confuse people.
Mm-hmm. Okay, quick question. Do you think it's a good idea for paranormal investigators to have at least some kind of knowledge on demonology, just in case they were to ever encounter a demonic situation, meaning they could absolutely recognize what was going on and possibly call in some professional to go from there?
Let's define demonology first, Steve. The problem with most people who call themselves demonologists is that they are studying one school of thought on what a demon is. Christian, Catholic, Hindu, whatever, it doesn't matter. And that's very limited. If you start labeling something, then you can help it manifest as that thing. So I don't like people studying demonology unless they're truly studying history. The first Christian book on demonology was written by King James, the same guy who commissioned the King James Bible, the same guy who, as a prince, had gone to witch trials and developed a horrifying hatred of witches. Definitely prejudiced, did not understand what he was dealing with, and should not be trusted for his sources. Most of the demons that Christianity has labeled were originally Mesopotamian and Sumerian gods. And when we moved into those locations, we had literally demonized their gods. So, like Hecate, you know, is now considered like sort of a demon in Christianity, but it's not. She's a goddess for believers in the old religion and in witchcraft. Witchcraft's been around for at least 35,000 years in one form or another. It's probably our first religion based on their living with nature, their understanding the properties of the plants and animals that they interacted with, and how those things could be used to manifest better effects in their lives. You want to go into the paranormal fatigue one?
Sorry.
That's okay. There's a question. Well, was Padre Pio connected through their faith? I believe so. But having said that, Padre Pio doesn't seem to care. If you call on Padre Pio, regardless if you're a Catholic or anything else, it's the fact that you're calling on Padre Pio that will bring him to you. He was happy to help anybody. He was definitely Catholic, though.
Mm-hmm.
So, have you ever experienced paranormal fatigue or burnout? Well, yeah, especially recently over the last few years when I've opened myself up so much more to the paranormal, to my own abilities. It's something I was always uncomfortable with because I used to scare people so much by reading their auras and revealing things nobody should know. But now I don't do that. I haven't done readings of auras in decades, but I do use them for talking with the dead, helping people cross over, psychometry, just feeling what's in a building so that I can get a better understanding of what I'm dealing with. We had a wonderful experience in a former bordello that here in Cartagena, in the Santa Fe area of Cartagena, which is the red light district. I went there with Archbishop Christian Piedrahito, who is a member of the foundation. It was his birthday. and when I have to use my abilities, I don't want to know anything before I go into a place. And that's a good rule of thumb for any psychic. Don't learn anything, because if you do, then anything you feel is suspect. And I could pick up on the bodies in the basement. I knew areas that real violence had taken place, that the people that were there were drug dealers, narcos, and politicians. And even on the stairs, I was on the stairs, and normally stairs are a place that are, enclosed and energy can build up. And I said, I don't feel anything on these stairs. And Archbishop said to me, well, actually, those stairs are brand new. They weren't there when it was a bordello. I was like, okay. And then I was upstairs and I said to him, so there are a bunch of bodies in the basement, aren't there? And he said, how did you know that? I said, yeah, well, they're going to have to examine the ground for chemicals because they used chemicals to break down the bodies. And the woman from the government who was with us confirmed all of that. So I don't believe my abilities unless I have evidence to back it up.
And how much experience do you need to deal with this kind of evil?
This isn't something to take lightly. If you're not going in there with people who know what they're doing, then don't go in there at all. And be very, very careful that the people that you're going in with don't act like superheroes or superstars. If they're not going in there humbly and understanding, and they don't understand that it's God's power and not your own that matters, then you're not with somebody who knows what they're doing, and you're going to get yourself hurt. This isn't, all the cowboys that are out there drive me nuts, because the stuff you see on YouTube for the most part is a bunch of crap. And if you did what most of them do, you'd get yourself hurt. There's one jackass. I don't even know who he is, thank God. But he creates his own Ouija boards using his own blood. And when you put that much energy and that much of yourself into it, your intentions are pretty well focused and you can get yourself really badly hurt.
Yeah, and they're the ones that call us for help.
Yeah, too often, unfortunately.
Okay, this is off subject, but it was the third Conjuring movie true?
Well, the case is true. They're all the cases in the Conjuring movies are real. How well they're portrayed is a whole nother story. Um, I know the Glotzels. I know Arnie and his wife who passed away recently. And I know that this was a true case. I also know even then, when I was 14, I was like, Gramps, not Grandpa, never Grandpa, Gramps. Um, you know, you can't use possession as a legal defense. It doesn't exist. And well, he believed that it should be, but it would have opened a can of worms, and every guy on death row would have said he was possessed. Now, how do you prove one way or another whether that's true?
What do you think about DeFeo saying he was the Amityville Horror? He saw a video of him saying as much.
What does that mean? He was the Amityville Horror. I mean, Ron DeFeo has changed his story over the years several times. You know, he was a drug addict, but he did say he was under possession. His father had actually driven all the way up to Montreal, up to the cathedral up there, and bought a bunch of Catholic statues. Now, Ron DeFeo Sr., from all accounts, was a real SOB, and rough with his family. But he had bought all of these statues and he's putting them up inside and outside the house. And when he was asked, why are you doing this by neighbors? He said, I have a devil on my back. And everybody assumed they were talking about his son, who was a heroin addict. But the evidence seems overwhelming that he actually did come under possession.
And then,
I like the question about how would you be able to tell a good psychic from a fake one?
yep.
Here's what I would do. First off, never trust a psychic unless you've got overwhelming evidence that what they're telling you is true. Don't change your life based on my feelings, because that's just insane.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one guy who had done this, and I thought this was such a smart idea. Go to your psychic that you want to tell a reading and say, I want to contact my Uncle Ted, if you don't have an Uncle Ted. And a good psychic isn't going to start talking to this non-existent Uncle Ted. They're going to talk to the spirit that actually presents itself in the home, or I mean, in the space with you. So that's a good way to do it.
And we are all caught up on questions.
Yeah. We're happy to talk about anything you like, but I guess at the end of the day, the thing to remember is how much power we have, that we can manifest a lot of these things. There's far more quantum physics involved in what we deal with than superstition. I am not a superstitious person. I'm not going to worry about black cats or walking under ladders or anything like that, because I've never given energy to those beliefs. Heck, black cats have been considered lucky in many cultures, just like the number 13 is considered lucky in some cultures. It all depends on what you put your energy into and what you help manifest that matters. And I think it's an important thing to keep in mind, because think about that and what it means to our reality and what we can do if we throw positive energy out there instead of negative. What could we possibly manifest?
Mm-hmm.
I deal with lots of problems all the time, but in the past, I would have let those things overwhelm me. I would have been sad and hurt and feel bad for others. And now my attitude is 180 degrees different. And I'm always positive, regardless of how many bad things are going on around me. And my life couldn't be happier. I Cultivating an attitude of gratitude
Mhm.
will change your life. I was so disabled, so incredibly disabled, that I couldn't get out of my recliner except to go to the bathroom. I couldn't cook. I couldn't walk. I couldn't go into a store to buy milk. I couldn't do anything. And today I can do everything that I want to do. Well, almost. I started trekking the Himalayas many years ago, and I did it for about 10 days, but I got hurt on a glacier. My goal is still to get to Everest Base Camp, but we'll see if that happens with my bad knees and bad back.
Oh, you never know what can happen. If you believe it, it can happen.
Hey, if a 90-year-old blind man can climb Everest, there's still hope
Mhm.
for me.
Yes. Hey, do you like that they made the movies about the cases?
Yes. Yeah. Without the notoriety that has come from these, the foundation wouldn't exist. We started the foundation, my grandmother and I, because we were getting so many requests from all around the world. And the New England Society for Psychic Research is New England. It's not world famous, not by itself. And I wanted to keep my grandparents' work and their name alive. And so I talked to my grandmother about it, and she loved the idea. Actually, she wanted us to change the New England Society's name, but at that point, Tony was in charge, so he didn't like that idea at all. Um, and so we don't actually work together. But what we did do with my grandmother's blessing was expand our mission around the world, and we wouldn't be able to do that if the movies hadn't made us world famous. So we're building on it. We're constantly growing. We're constantly looking for good people, professional people who are dedicated to helping others. We don't care what your religion is, but we do care that you have the right mindset.
Mhm. Yep. And if I don't have any special abilities, is there a way to try and develop them?
Absolutely, yeah. Testing yourself constantly. One way you can do that is meditation first and allowing yourself to relax, and then maybe ask a friend to give you objects that they know the history of, but you don't. And hold on to that object and start telling your friend what you're feeling, what you're picking up. And don't be afraid to be wrong, because you will be wrong most of the time. But when you start going down the right path, then you'll start to pick up more and more and more. So that's one way to do it. There are many different ways of enhancing your abilities. And I'm going to turn it over to Heather, because honestly, she probably knows more about that than I do.
Actually, it's funny because Kenneth Holden and I were on Ghost Education 101 last week, and we talked about that. And it's just all a matter of practice. I'm still learning. So it's a matter of learning and being able to recognize on top of it. One thing that I talked to my mom about when I was visiting, whenever we walk into an antique store, depending
Mm-hmm.
on the store, I feel claustrophobic. I start sweating. I feel like something's poking me in the temple. And then the minute I walk out the doors, I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of recognizing the signs. And then, like you said, meditating. I think it was the Zender cards you can
Yep.
practice with,
Yep.
work on that, and just relax, open yourself up to it. It's one of those, you don't want to open yourself up really to paranormal activity, but you can't really enhance any type of abilities that you may have unless you are, if you're stressed, it's not going to work. Trust me, I've learned that.
Mm-hmm. Don't
And
do it with mind altering drugs either.
that too.
If you don't know what you're doing, don't get me wrong. People have been using mind altering drugs for thousands of years, but it's always done with supervision and ritual to help focus what people are going through. If, for instance, you want to try ayahuasca, then come on down to South America, go see an actual reputable shaman, and go through the actual ritual and learn how to do it properly. I don't have a problem with that, but there are less extreme ways
Mhm.
of working on your abilities.
Right.
Cards are a great way of
Mhm.
doing that, because they're basic shapes and colors, and you're trying to pick up on one or the other.
Mhm.
That's a great way of opening yourself up. But I wouldn't jump into spirit communication by any means. Um, Pendulums or tarot cards
Mhm.
are a way of focusing your abilities. For me, when I used to use tarot cards, it was because I was no longer comfortable using my abilities by themselves. I wanted to distance myself from my abilities. So
Mhm.
I would use the cards in that way.
Right. And I also tell people to pay attention to their dreams because just last week, a friend of mine had passed away and I was having trouble with it. And that next night, he came to me in my dream and told me not to worry about him. He's perfectly fine, and just I seem to have more communication in my dreams than anything else.
Yeah, spirit communication through dreams is the easiest. As I had mentioned earlier in the interview, when we're dreaming, we're closer to the astral plane and it's much easier for them to reach us. But those dreams have a far more realistic quality than ordinary dreams, and they will stick with you. So that's important to keep in mind as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, question. Is it possible that certain spirits can communicate with us telepathically, putting different thoughts into our minds?
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly. Yes. Not, I mean, even when they contact us in our dreams, it's done that way. I remember, now this isn't a spirit per se, but when I was in my late teens, I fell in love with a young lady at college. And anytime she was in trouble, I would hear my voice, I would hear my name called. You know, was that a spirit or was that our psychic connection that I had created? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know for sure. Probably psychic connection in that case, though. Um, I've had 13 years ago, my fiance died of cancer. And I was awoken one night in the middle of the night by heavy footsteps coming down the hallway. And I recognized those footsteps immediately as Diana. And I opened my eyes, and even in a pitch black room, I could see the mirror hanging on the bedroom door. And in the mirror, I could see her behind me, propped up on one elbow, looking down at me with a smile on her face. And I closed my eyes immediately because she had already appeared to me once before and then left. And I didn't want to see her go again. Crazy, I know. What do you expect? I had just woken up. Um, and she got right in front of me. And she said, "I love you." And then she kissed me on the lips and she was gone. So yeah, they can absolutely come through.
I feel like I've lived other lives just from my dreams, and it seems like memories. Do you think this happens?
Research your dreams. If you've got information, here's what I tell people to do, especially when it comes to dreams. Keep a pad and pen next to your bed. It must be a pad and pen. You cannot have anything electronic because as soon as you turn that on, everything that you just dreamt of will be erased from your mind. So, in the dark, don't turn on the light if you can help it. Write down as much as you can remember in as much detail. As you continue to do this on a regular basis, you will find that these dream journals will start translating into real powerful messages that you can start to interpret.
Mhm.
And this is true basically of any way you learn to focus your abilities. It's your intention that is more important than anything else.
Mhm.
And as soon as you start practicing something ritually and doing it on a regular basis, then you can help to enhance yourself.
They say seeing a psychic is bad. It can open the wrong doors. Is that true?
I don't think I'm bad. I don't think Heather's bad. Um, Having said that, as I had said earlier about the Annabelle doll, they had contacted somebody who was a medium, and the medium got everything completely wrong. It isn't the person that's bad per se, although, yeah, obviously there are plenty of hoaxes out there and bad people out there. Um, there is actually a syndicate that controls a lot of the psychics businesses in the United States, and they're kind of fake. I would go with people who are private before anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And as I had said earlier, don't change your life without evidence. Fine, get some guidance. That's fine. But
Mm-hmm.
unless there's overwhelming evidence that they're right, don't change your life. Don't be like the woman who had contacted me because a prophet had told her that a Lilith demon was attached to her. And so she had manifested something horrifying in her life. No, it isn't true. It didn't happen. But because she believed in it so much, she made it happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Do you believe nightmares can be warnings in certain situations?
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, most of the time, people don't understand what it is they're seeing until, the airplane that they just dreamt about actually goes down. Then it's a little late to have done anything about it.
Okay, we're caught up again. Sometimes we get so far behind on comments because they all come through at the same time.
Somebody was saying that they got a name from a previous life in a reading in a dream, and the name actually existed. Yeah, I completely believe that. It's kind of like Nostradamus predicting the rise of Hitler instead of Hitler.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. It's amazing what can come to you in your dreams, or just if you focus on it.
Absolutely. Is there anything that's burning in people's minds that they want some guidance on or help? Be very careful about things like opening yourself up to psychics. As Joshua said, if you give a psychic your real name, they can go on social media before they meet you and get a whole bunch of information.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to fake. I don't believe digital photography for the most part. I hate it. It's so easily faked. And even when it's somebody genuinely is questioning what they're looking at, and I believe that of them, I don't think they're faking it. A fly or a moth can look like an orb on digital photography.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not something to jump to conclusions on. You should always assume it's natural.
Right. Yeah. Someone shared in the group that I'm in a photo, and it was from their Ring camera. And it looks like a white creature in the middle of the yard, but when you look closer at it, it's a spider that crawled over the camera lens.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Yep.
Lewis is asking, do I believe in reincarnation? Absolutely. So did my grandparents. Matter of fact, when I was 16, my grandfather taught me regression hypnosis, which is the practice of putting somebody back into the past, whether it be this lifetime or previous lifetimes. They were strong believers as I am. I don't believe that one lifetime is enough for us to get that close to God. It takes time to learn empathy and kindness and love and let go of attachments that we create. My understanding of karma is different than the Western idea, or even often the Hindu idea. Because for me, it's about attachments that we create in lifetime, the things that we can't let go of. It's why we go through lifetimes with so many of the same souls over and over and over again in different ways. The person that you loved in this lifetime is your killer in your next lifetime and is your boss in the next lifetime. Because it's a dance. Life is a dance, and you're here to learn certain things, and they're here to both learn from you and to help teach you by providing you challenges that you need to overcome.
Steve wants to know, is it bad for him and his team to go out and do investigations? We've been doing them for several years and doing it for learning purposes.
Well, Steve, that's a hard question for me to answer because I don't know you. I don't know what your experiences have been. I don't know what your practices are. I don't know how you protect yourselves. One thing I do know, our first rule of conduct is if you're not there to help someone, you shouldn't be there at all. So if you're going into an abandoned location and you're not there to help a spirit, at least, then I question your motivation. I get it. A lot of people say they're there to collect data, but if you're not sharing that data with a research foundation like the Warren Legacy Foundation, then why are you collecting the data? What good is collecting data if you don't use it to understand the phenomena? And if you're working in a vacuum, then you're not really very professional because all scientists share their data.
And I've worked with several who have gone on investigations with us, even residential for clients, and they don't review their evidence. It's like, how can you help the client, or why even go on an investigation? You're not learning anything if you're not practicing how to review your evidence.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I'm so happy that we've got people like you, actually, who know how to review video evidence and so forth, because, I'm old school. If it's not a tape recorder, I'm a little lost.
Okay, and I think we have time for one more question. Do you rely on your faith and religion to understand things besides the knowledge you have?
Faith, absolutely. Religion, not at all. I'm a minister, but without a religion. I believe the problem is, the goal is a spiritual connection to God, and that comes from inside. Religion is a truth or a way that has been learned by one or many and shared to many others, and it gets twisted and turned into doctrine, and it loses a lot. It can lead you to a spiritual connection to God, but it isn't necessary for a spiritual connection to God. Ritual is very important for focusing your intention in your faith. So when I do perform exorcisms or I do a spiritual cleansing of a home, I use Catholic rituals because I was raised a Catholic, because I can use those in a way that helps me to focus my faith. But that doesn't mean I'm a Catholic. I'm not. Nor am I a Buddhist or a Hindu or anything else. I think God has manifested in many ways to people in the world, trying to help them to get closer to him. And that if you believe, as NASA says, that there are more living worlds in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth, then every single picture we have of God in our minds is inadequate. We're like blind men, each touching a different part of an elephant. One's touching the tail and says it's a rope. One's touching the trunk and says it's a snake. And one's touching a leg and says it's a tree, because they're not able to grasp the entire thing. My faith comes in accepting that God is beyond me and his perspective is greater than mine. And so I have to have faith.
Okay. Sorry, one more question. How can I share my data with the foundation?
Heather?
Well, I just shared, again, information if you would like information on joining the foundation. But then if you want to discuss how to share your data with us, you can send us just a general request with your email and information letting us know what you're looking for or how you want to help the foundation. And I'm the one who gets these forms, so I'll make sure that either I or someone else gets in touch with you.
Absolutely. And Steve, I'd be happy to talk to you as well. I have an open door policy. I'm here if I'm needed, always.
Okay, and before we go, real quick, here's where you can find us on Facebook at Warren Legacy Foundation or the official Chris McKinnell. And you can also find us on YouTube at The Warren Files.
Oh my gosh, I was just reminding myself watching last year's Annabelle and Amityville episodes. I cannot believe how different I look and everything else. The change has been extraordinary. And for those who don't know, I was so overwhelmingly large. I've lost over 245 pounds, and my life is completely different. Couldn't be better.
Mm-hmm.
So it's weird, even a year ago, looking at those, I'm like, holy God, who was that guy?
Yep. And then someone asked real quick, will these videos be available? All of our videos are on YouTube at The Warren Files. You can find the ones that Chris was talking about that are more than a year old. And actually, some of them I went back and rewatched before I even joined the foundation. And that's what got me interested in it.
It's good information. There's over 80 videos there. But forgive me, because God, in some of them I just and the production quality is pretty bad. I mean, they're as honest as you could ever hope for from anybody. We don't do them for money. We don't make money on anything we do. It's just about helping and educating.
Yep. Okay. And then our next presentation, we are taking a week off as always because we flip flop with Ghost Education 101. But
And then
Chris,
Christmas.
yeah, we're going to be talking about kids, the paranormal, and psychic abilities on December 15th at 9 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, sounds fun.
So that was one that Kenneth has been wanting to do with you.
Oh, okay. Sounds great.
Yep.
Looking forward to it. I certainly have plenty of stories of kids who manifest abilities.
Okay, and that is it for tonight. So thank you again, Chris, for actually letting me do this. I know I kind of took the lead on it and said, hey, we're relaunching this.
And you know how grateful I am to you. You're amazing. Hey, there's a suggestion I'd like to add.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to have Archbishop Christian Piedrahita on a show with us.
Okay.
His unique perspective here in South America and his experience, tremendous experience, I think would be something that people would find very interesting. Okay. And he's a very loving, humble man, very accepting of other religions. Definitely somebody people should get to know.
Right. I can move things around and we can have him on our first show after the new year.
Oh, let's ask him. That would be great.
Yeah. Perfect. I'll make sure I post that comment and ask him and get it set up. Well, thank you again, everybody, for watching. And I hope you guys have a great weekend, or it's Wednesday, so weekend. And we will see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone. God bless you all. Heather, thank you. As always, you're the best. Thank you, everybody who joined us tonight. And if you ever need anything, we're here for you. God bless you.
Thank you. Have a great night.